Ladies and gentlemen, to, to the first webinar organized by the Institute of Historical Studies. We welcome you to Professor N. Subrahamanian Endowment Lecture 2019-20. Because of the global pandemic, we are not being able to host this lecture in our office. So we are holding it through Google Meet, and the first webinar is being held in this form of this lecture. Now, the topic of this lecture is solar energy then and now. The lecture will be delivered by Professor Parthasarathi Majumdar. And now, without much ado, I would now request our Honorable Director, Professor Chittabrata Palit, to please say a few words about Professor N. Subrahamanian and also introduce the speaker. Thank you. স্যার আপনি বলুন স্যার
আনমিউট করা আছে, মিউট করতে হবে না।
স্যার মিউট করে বলুন। ও স্যার স্যার আনমিউট করুন। স্যার আপনার মিউট করা আছে, আনমিউট করুন।
হ্যালো প্রফেসর পালিত, আপনার মাইক্রোফোনের উপরে ক্লিক করতে হবে।
আপনি আনমিউট করুন স্যার।
স্যার আপনি আনমিউট করুন। স্যার আনমিউট করুন।
Hello. Is it okay?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I can hear you. স্যার বলুন।
Hello.
হ্যাঁ স্যার বলুন, শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
Mind the ship.
স্যার বলুন, আমরা শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
আমরা শুনতে পাচ্ছি স্যার।
Mind the ship.
স্যার বলুন।
স্যার বলুন, শুনতে পাচ্ছি আমরা।
Hello.
হ্যালো স্যার।
স্যার বলুন না।
স্যার বলুন।
Hello.
Hello.
Can I start?
Yes, sir. Yes. Sir, start.
Okay. As I have already heard you, Abarno, this is a special webinar sponsored by N. Subrahamanian Endowments. Because of this raging pandemic, we couldn't hold our usual academic programs. Instead, we are having this series of webinars. And this is the first one, as already described by Abarno Chatterjee, our PRO. This is funded by N. Subrahamanian Endowments. And our first speaker is Professor Parthasarathi Majumdar, whom I am going to introduce shortly. Before that, I would like to introduce the Subrahamanian Endowment, N. Subrahamanian himself. N. Subrahamanian was one of our founder members, and he remained on the executive committee for around 21 years. He also presided over one of our annual conferences at Nainital, hosted by Kumaon University at that time. That was in 1996. And since then, this has been held regularly at the institute physically. But now there is this difficulty of communication. Therefore, it is being held online. Now, that is all that I would say. Like on Subrahamanian, only I add that he remained with Annamala University for all his degrees. He ultimately achieved after PhD the special epithet, which is Vidwan. And when he retired, he went back to his hometown, Madurai, where he remained one of the professors, retired professors there for the rest of his time. He was a specialist on South Indian, ancient Indian history. His major work was the history of the Sangam period of South India between 7th and 13th centuries. Apart from that, he has written many articles, English and Tamil, and published in different journals. He also contributed to our journals at the same time. I think that is all about N. Subrahamanian, I could say. I used to know him personally. I met him there at the conference at Nainital, and very erudite, very affectionate person, and was very close to our founder director, S.V. Sen. Now I switch on to the speaker tonight, and that is our dear Professor Parthasarathi Majumdar. His background is well known to you, but still I'm saying a few words about him. He got his education from Brandeis University and University of Maryland, completing all his degrees, and then he came back to India and remained a staff of the Madras Science and Development Studies, then at the famous institute at Bombay, that is Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. After that, he returned to Kolkata, and he was also a fellow of the Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics. And finally, he is now the visiting professor in the Department of Physical Sciences as at the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science. That is his journey, a memorable journey. I have already heard him once at the institute when we held the Abul Kalam, sorry, our past president, APJ Abdul Kalam, and he spoke very well on that occasion, giving us a sketch of what Abdul Kalam stood for in science. And today we are eagerly looking forward to his lecture on solar power then and now. And I now would like to call him to begin his lecture. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me, all of you? Can any one of you say whether I am audible?
Yes, you're audible.
You are
It is
audible.
You are audible.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely grateful that all of you have come and have been patiently waiting for this to start. Well, the blame has to be on me. Basically, my computer worked up, and I am forced to use my sister's computer to give this talk. Therefore, the talk will not be in the way that I would have liked to give you. There will be some shortcomings, and I shall have to seek the cooperation from Sheikh Moidul Rahman and also from the other technicians. So basically, it is indeed an honor and privilege to be able to give this talk. I have never met Professor Subrahamanian, and I'm very thankful to Professor Palit and to Abarno Chatterjee for this extremely kind invitation. I wanted to talk about solar energy. in this time of the pandemic, you might think this is not a very good subject, but I'd like to make a connection at some point. So if we go to the next slide, Moidul, can you go to the next slide? Yes. No, can you lower that a bit? Yeah. So I would like to say that, well, I had a picture for you which I could not show you. And this is not this picture, but a picture which was taken by a reconnaissance mission of Apollo 8 moon mission on its journey, where they tried to scan the lunar surface to make sure that a future mission could land a lunar orbiter there. While they were doing this, they suddenly saw a beautiful sight, something bluish and white coming up on the horizon, and they couldn't understand what this was. And eventually they figured out that this is the Earthrise on the lunar surface. The Earth looked beautiful, but extremely fragile, blue with white clouds. The most beautiful planet in the solar system, but also very fragile. However, this is important because it changed the entire way that we thought about our Earth, our beautiful Mother Earth. There is only one Mother Earth, that is where we all live. And yet, we are trying to destroy this Earth, sometimes quite inadvertently. For instance, when you do something like turning on an electrical switch, which is something we all do to turn on a gadget, a light or a fan, you are contributing to this destruction. Let me explain how this happens. So this is the picture which you can see on your screens. The picture shows electricity coming to our homes from a thermal power plant. It is a thermal power plant because you can see in the picture smoke coming out from the chimneys. You will see a little bit more later on. So the way it happens is that when you turn on a switch, the power plant has to work more to supply you with the electricity that you now desire to turn on the gadget in your house. When you do that, there is more smoke produced. The smoke is produced in the power station from the burning of coal. There is more smoke produced, and therefore there is more pollution. So you can see the various stages. The current comes from the power station to a transformer which raises it up, raises the voltage up, and then there are long transmission lines, and then all the way to our homes. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next picture, yeah. Yeah, so here you see actual picture of a thermal power station. What happens in a thermal power station is coal is burnt to produce, well, coal is burnt to heat up water, which produces steam, which becomes steam, and the steam is used to run turbines, which produces electricity. These big towers there are the cooling towers, and the narrow, tall ones are actually where the coal is being burnt. But the sum total of this experience of burning coal to produce electricity by turning a turbine from the steam happens, what it produces is a lot of smoke. And the smoke is laden with coal, with carbon dioxide. So if you go to the next slide, next transparency, next slide, please. Yeah. So here you can see it's very, very smoky. So this is the environment close to a power station. So if you're living in an environment which is close to a power station, every time one of us turns on a switch, there's more smoke coming out. And when we go to the next picture, the next slide, please, the next slide. This is typically one of the few places which are close to power stations where you can see that there is a lot of smoke. Now the smoke is smog, really, and it's causing a lot of problems. So every time we turn on a switch, which we must, in order to turn on an electrical gadget, we are contributing to this. Oh, I've lost it somehow. Sorry, who was presenting? I think Shudip. Yeah, okay. Base lecture, please come back. Yeah, okay. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so here I'm asking the question, what is wrong with increasing air pollution? Now, this is not a question one should ask. I think the answer is more or less obvious, but still I've listed a few things. Like air quality degradation would lead to lung diseases, the ozone layer depletion would lead to skin cancer because the ultraviolet rays from the sun would not be stopped by the ozone layer in the atmosphere. Global warming will contribute to polar caps melting, flooding. So as a result, either we live with the pollution, and if so, we shall have to learn how to live in water because the Ganga is going to flood and we shall have nowhere to go. Also, the air pollution causes global warming, which produces incredible damage to the flora and fauna, to the extent that some species of birds, animals, as well as plants are so sensitive to temperature changes that if the temperature becomes too high, they no longer survive. So you will actually have an irreversible damage in terms of extinction of species. There's of course a natural limit to how much coal you can use. And in that matter, if you can just roll up can you roll up the screen, please? Yeah. So what I have here is a quotation from William Stanley Jevons in 1865. You know, in 1865, coal was the prime mover. It was the source of all electricity, all power. There was coal engines all over the place. However, look at what he says. I must point out the painful fact that such a rate of growth will before long render our consumption of coal comparable with the total supply. In the increasing depth and difficulty of coal mining, we shall meet that vague but inevitable boundary that will stop our progress. Now, this for India is real. It is actually happening. However, what are we going to do? Are we going to open more coal mines? Is that the answer? Because you can see that to have more coal, you have to go to increasing depth and increase the area for these coal mines. You have to have these open cast coal mines, which are being planned by both the central as well as the state governments. But when you have those mines, when you construct those mines, you're going to destroy forests and human habitats. So is this the smart thing to do? I think it is the stupidest thing to do because you have an alternative. When I talk about an alternative, this alternative is solar energy. The solar energy the concept of solar energy goes back very old to the time of the Rig Veda. Now, those of you who have studied the Rig Veda even a little bit, maybe the first chapter, would know that the first chapter of the Rig Veda has an entire section devoted to Savita, which is Surya, which is the sun. And there are shlokas which tell you categorically that the source of all energy on earth is the sun. Even the coal that we are using so happily comes because the sun has petrified old forests. So basically the source is the sun. But we have an option which our rishis did not realize. We can use solar energy directly. This is something which modern science has made it accessible. Can you roll up the slide, please? What is the advantage? And I'll show some pictures of solar panels, but we'll come back to that later. So solar energy is free of carbon dioxide, which means you do not pollute the atmosphere at all. And it's unlimited. And it's unlimited in the sense that, no, just roll it down a little bit. Sorry, can you roll it down? Yeah. And it's unlimited because it will never deplete so long as our grandchildren and grandchildren of our grandchildren live on this planet. So this is, as long as the sun does not change from its present configuration, solar energy is there. It's a free resource. Unlike any other source of energy, solar energy is free. Nobody charges you for it. For coal, for water, for petroleum, you have to pay. But solar energy is free. It is also freely accessible. What I mean by free in the first case is free of cost. The second is freely accessible. These are two different freedoms. In the second case, it's sort of Gandhian because Gandhi always thought very highly of individual freedom. And basically, solar energy affords maximum individual freedom. I can stop your water. If I have a lot of power, I can stop your electricity if I want, if it comes from a thermal power station. But I cannot prevent you from enjoying your sunshine. A related question is who owns the sun? The answer is nobody or everybody. So solar energy is absolutely different from any other source of energy. This is something we don't realize often, but I would like to make this point very emphatically. The other thing that I would like to emphasize is that you can actually use solar energy yourself. With little bit of training, you can use it yourself at home. So it's not something that you need great experts. It's not something that you have to look up to a government or some big company to avail of. In this sense, it's also very different. The other point I would like to say is more speculative. Because it is so freely accessible and free, all you need is to be able to convert solar energy into usable energy like electricity. It, in a sense, could be a way to reduce the global economic inequality. But because this is the Institute of Historical Studies, I should say a little bit about the history of solar energy. So if we go back, can we raise this slide? I would like to go back to very ancient times. This is the story. Can you? Yeah, yes, please. Yeah, fine. So this is the story. The top panel, you see, is a picture of the kind of dwellings that the Pueblo tribe in Northern America, near Colorado, used to make. See, these dwellings are made in a very cold area. Colorado is extremely cold. So this is in the Rockies, the cliff face, in such a way that the dwellings would emit as much sunshine as possible. So you can see that this is the first direct usage of solar energy that has been documented. I don't know how old this is, but this is supposed to be quite old. Can you go up a little bit? The next slide, please. The next picture. Yeah. This is a picture of a Roman bath. Now, this picture comes from a place called Bath in UK, but Bath is basically for the Roman baths, which when the Romans invaded UK, they've constructed baths like this. So the top part of the building is a modern renovation, but the bottom part, you can see there are bath houses. There are houses where people keep their things and then they take a dip into the pool, which is directly heated by sunshine. So this is remarkable that this was happening before the birth of Christ. This was already in some 100 BCs. They realized that you can use solar energy directly to heat water in a cold climate. Okay, the next slide, please. Now, after the Second World War, there was a certain shortage in petroleum and also in coal mining because people were returning from the war. There was a lot of tiredness and so on. So at that time, direct solar heating and cooking became very fashionable. Here I show two pictures. This is direct solar heating houses. Now they look just like huge glass panels installed, but these glass panels come with a difference because these are actually two panels with a kind of chemical between the two panels, which helps in absorption of sunshine. So this became very popular because again, these are cold climes. This right-hand picture is from Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, which is near Lake Erie, which is a big lake in the northeastern part or north central part of the United States. So direct solar heating became very popular in the 1950s. Go up, please, the next slide, the next picture. Yeah, here we have another wonderful picture of a solar furnace. This is from France. This uses what are called solar concentrators, basically concave mirrors, to focus sunshine, the sun's rays, at a particular point. Now they found that if they could make the concave mirrors large enough, then they could use sunshine to run a furnace. A very short, or I should say a very modern, I should say this is basically the same idea, the solar cooker. This is a picture of a solar cooker. We have a solar cooker at our home, which is very similar. Now this picture, you can see that there is direct sunshine, and I can tell you, those of you who haven't had an experience of solar cooking, it's fantastic. It's really good quality cooking because it's slow cooking, and we all enjoy solar cooked food. Chingri machen, malai curry, mangsho, everything can be cooked using this solar cooker. And the taste is very different from what you can achieve at home by using your gas stove. So you should give it a try. And this cooker is not very expensive. I think now it may be around 2,000 rupees. So there are various sizes and options. But anyway, you see, direct solar heating is all very good, but there is this question of storage. You'd like to use energy from the sun even when the sun isn't there, like at night. So you would like to be able to store the solar energy, and in that, okay, so the next, can you raise this next one, please? Yeah, okay, so a little bit more, please, a little bit more. So here we find, no, we have to show this picture of this gentleman, Edmund Becquerel. Edmund Becquerel was the first to realize that if you had light falling on a piece of metal, then by adjusting the color of the light, it is possible to produce an electric current. He made that experiment in 1839, but it took Albert Einstein almost some 56 years later to be able to understand what is going on. And the picture below is basically a cartoon which shows what's going on. So you can see sun rays or any light rays falling on a metal sheet. Now here, the green, I don't know if you can see this, but the green little blobs, they are what are called the atomic nuclei. They are protons and neutrons bound together. And the orange balls are supposed to represent electrons. Because this is a metal, there are a few electrons scattered a little far away from the nuclei. Now, when light falls on this kind of a metal, what it does is it pushes the electron. If the color of the light is adjusted appropriately, it doesn't happen for all the colors. So depending on the metal, there is a color for which it is possible for light to eject an electron. Now, when you eject an electron, what you find is that there's a flow of electrons. So you eject enough electrons from this sheet of metal. There's a set of electrons that you have produced which are no longer tied to the nuclei. They are completely free. And when a voltage is present, they will constitute an electric current. So this is called the photoelectric effect, producing electricity by shining light on a metal plate. So here it was, photoelectricity, which was discovered by Becquerel, explained by Einstein, which became very handy. So people began to experiment with sunlight. Can we produce electricity if we allowed sunlight to shine on various objects like metals or like another kind of objects which are called semiconductors? So the research continued. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see pioneers. So these are the pioneers, 1954 in the Bell Labs in the United States. They were the first to produce silicon solar cells in 1954. Darrell Chapin, Calvin Fuller, and Gerald Pearson, they were the first to produce a silicon solar cell, which, when light shone on it, would produce electricity. It will produce direct current electricity at a low voltage. And on the left panel below, you see that there is a picture of a 1950s solar panel. And on the right side, we have a modern looking silicon solar panel. So you can see from 1954 till 2020, silicon solar panels have been with us. They're extremely efficient. The efficiency of these monocrystalline or even polycrystalline solar panels is now in the 20% range, which is very much higher than what Chapin, Fuller, and Pearson could get at that time. And there is research going on. So there is an incredible revolution that happened, because the moment you can produce electricity, you see, you can store electricity. So then you can use this electricity. How do you store electricity? By putting it into a battery, for instance. That's the simplest. There are also other ways, but that's really the simplest. You charge a battery with sunshine, with sunlight, by connecting the battery to the solar panel. And then the battery, after the battery gets charged, you can use the battery in the evening to use whatever gadgets you have, like lights, like fans, and a host of other gadgets. I shall talk about these gadgets a little bit later on. But what I would like to say is that this continued. So this was the beginning, silicon solar panels, first polycrystalline, then monocrystalline. And the next slide will show you another kind of solar panels, which were pioneered by an Indian, a Bengali, Shubhendu Guha. He was at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, which Professor Palit mentioned. I was there. I overlapped with him. I used to know him. But then he made a breakthrough. This was really a fantastic piece of work. He found that amorphous silicon is not crystalline silicon. It's produced with less care and therefore cheaper. If you have amorphous silicon, then you can go from those rigid-looking solar panels, which I showed you earlier, to these thin film flexible solar panels that you see in the bottom two pictures. So in the left picture, you see that there's a solar panel which is like a wave. You have this flexibility to construct, to manufacture a solar panel which you can give any shape. So, this, I had some pictures which I can't show you, unfortunately, which in fact, I was able to buy them. So this amorphous silicon solar panels created another breakthrough. On the right panel, you see in the United States, somebody, Parul Chatterjee, would you please stop presenting? Miss Parul Chatterjee, stop presenting, please. Yeah, okay. So you see in the right, there are these roofs. Now, in the United States and the UK and most of Western Europe, these roofs are usually, they're constructed as a slope because there's snowfall and they would like the snow to drift away. And usually the roof is made up of what are called shingles. They're like tiles, but not exactly tiles. They're shingles. Now, Shubhendu Guha had this brilliant idea that instead of having panels like this. He tried to convince people to put these panels, but they didn't like the look of this. So he said, don't worry, all I'll do is produce shingles. So he produced these shingles, which you can see are very flexible, amorphous silicon panels, which you can use instead of your ordinary porcelain or ceramic shingles. And each of them will now conduct electricity, will catch sunshine and convert it into electricity. So you have this whole array of little generators of electricity, which you can use. Now, before I go to the next slide, I'd like to show that I again wanted to show you a picture of the modern developments beyond silicon. And there are, we'll come to this later on, but before that, I'd like to say that there is a huge material science revolution going on at the current time. I could not get the pictures because of my computer problems, but these materials which are now used go beyond silicon because they are more flexible and maybe they are even more efficient. I'll name some names. There is something called copper indium gallium selenide, CIGS, which is very useful. I'll show you a picture of such a panel later on. There's also something called perovskite panels, which are very, very flexible, and they are usually thin films. You also have panels made out of organic material. Now, if you look outside, if you just forget my lecture and look outside, look out of your window, you see trees and you see leaves. Now it's impossible, but each leaf is basically a solar panel. So we're actually far behind nature, because look at the variety of leaves that you see in nature. We are only a few steps towards reaching that variety. We are far away from it. But already material science is giving us enormous variety of materials which are not necessarily naturally occurring, which are very useful to capture electricity. So this is wonderful. Okay, the next slide. The next slide, please. Yeah. Now, you might want to know where is India? What do we do in India? Well, I can tell you what we do in India. Some places in India manufacture the type 1, the old first generation monocrystalline or polycrystalline solar panels. Beyond that, the manufacture of the more advanced amorphous panels, or the CIGS or perovskite or thin film panels, have not happened yet in India. So we are really lagging behind. We are still stuck with the first generation of panels. But we are good in applications, I suppose, because India now has the largest solar power plants in the world. You see, Bhadla in Rajasthan, Bhadla Park, has this enormous, so each of these little blue things is actually a solar panel. The right-hand side is a picture from Madhya Pradesh, Rewa, which is another gigantic solar power plant. In the lower panel below, we have another power plant from Tamil Nadu. And last but not the least, the one right-hand below panel is a solar power plant in West Bengal, believe it or not. I exactly don't know where it is. I think it's close to Purulia somewhere, but I don't know the name of the city. So these are what are called mega power plants. They produce enormous amounts of electricity, which is again distributed, but there are issues here. So can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, you have to keep going now. Go to the next slide. Yeah. So you see, one by one, there's a transmission loss problem. Okay. So there's you can keep going. I'll tell you to stop. Yeah. Keep going. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. The previous one. Yes. Okay. So these are the issues with mega solar plants. It turns out, of course, there's a transmission loss. This transmission loss is very similar to the loss from thermal power stations. So although you have succeeded in avoiding pollution at the source of creation of electricity, there is a transmission loss happening. Also, I already told you that solar energy, when converted through solar panels, produces DC electricity. On the other hand, we are accustomed to use AC. So this DC to AC conversion is costly and inefficient. There's a problem of fire. Now, this is an enormous problem. If a solar panel catches fire, what do? You saw the gigantic solar power plants. Now, if some panel in the middle has caught fire somehow, they're all connected electrically in order to produce that power. How do you reach there in the middle of the fire and douse the flames? This is almost an impossible task. You have to wait till the panel burns out. And with it, the circuitry also must burn out so that you can isolate it. Otherwise, it's impossible to isolate it. The solar power plant also has the same problem, that it's very centralized, controlled. It's controlled by the authority which produces the electricity. It's suitable for large industrial establishments, but for homes, etc., this is not really very good. And it is something which does not integrate well with the local economy, especially in rural and urban areas. If you go up a little, see, I would like to, can you go up a little, the slide, please? There I say that, উল্টো দিকে মানে নিচে যেতে চাই ঠিক আছে It denies users the inherent personal freedom. So solar energy gives you a freedom, but if you are dependent on a mega plant for your electricity, then you don't have any freedom. It's up to them to supply you with electricity. Okay, good. So let me carry on. The next picture. Yeah. So the alternative is what is called a rooftop situation. Now, in rooftop, there are two alternatives. আরেকটু উপরে, আরেকটু নিচ মানে পরের স্লাইডটা পুরো হয়। So in the rooftop situation, what happens is you cover an entire roof. This is especially true of big organizations, if you wish, big colleges and hospitals, where you have large roofs or large houses, flats which have large roofs. So you cover the roof with solar panels, which is good. And then you have an inverter, which converts the DC to AC. And then you have a meter, which supplies the electricity, but eventually the electricity goes directly to the grid. So this system is called a grid tie system. What it does is there are certain advantages of this system. So basically, you are not getting the solar electricity. What is happening is the solar electricity is being generated on your roof and being given to the electricity supplier. In Kolkata, this would be the Calcutta Electric Supply Corporation. In other places, it could be the West Bengal District Parshad. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show you the pros and cons of this system. You see, the good thing here is that because of the inverter, you can use standard 220-volt appliances, the ones that you use at home every day, and you don't require a separate storage. So what happens is, the way this deal works out is that because you are producing electricity for the electric company, be it government or private, they reduce your utility bill. So what you will see is that your utility bill has actually come down at the end of the month. But you don't really have much control over it. It's very good for industrial use because you're producing a lot of electricity, but you must realize that it's indirect use. You do not have direct access to the solar energy being produced on your roof. Hello?
জয়েন্ট বিপুল কুমার খুঁজতে
ওখানে আসবে না, এটাতে আসবে না জয়েন্ট বিপুল কুমার বলতে, এটাতে এই ফোন।
কি হয়েছে? হ্যাঁ, ঠিক আছে, আমরা সবটাই দেখাবো, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই। So you see, this indirect use means that you don't have any access. I'll tell you a story. I had gone to a college which had been given by the government some kind of a grant to cover their entire roof. They have a very large roof, cover their roof with rooftop solar panels which were connected to the grid. Because we work on solar energy, we were supposed to go and give a talk. This was the day of the inauguration. The panels, etc., were inaugurated, but suddenly there was a load shedding. And this is really weird because why is there a load shedding? The sun was shining very brightly above. So why is there a load shedding? And the reason is because, you see, you're not getting the sunshine, getting the electricity from the sun directly. It's going to the grid. And if there's some little problem in the grid somewhere, they're going to shut it off. So while you have a lot of electricity being produced, all that is going to the electric company. You have no control on how much carbon footprint you're reducing. Are you producing less carbon dioxide? I don't know. I mean, it's all the work of the electric company. The shock hazard, there is a shock hazard because you're using 220 volts. So, we have a shock hazard, we know how to handle it, but the same kind of hazard remains when you have this rooftop grid tie system. And of course, you are dependent very much on the electricity provider. Expensive installation and maintenance, yes, of course, because otherwise who would need a grant? The college cannot afford to have this system by themselves. So they need government grants for constructing it. So you might think that, and also the last thing is also the freedom idea, because I think this is very important to solar energy. Okay, the next one, number 17, please. Okay, so this is my favorite, off-grid standalone low voltage rooftop solar electricity. This basically means that you have your house, I have my house, everybody, all of us live in houses or flats or whatever. And we should have the freedom to use solar electricity exactly as we want it. I might not need to buy a piece of shirt during this puja, but maybe the next puja I want to buy 2 shirts. Similarly, I might be able to make with just one solar panel and maybe a light or whatever my need is, And when my need changes, when my need increases, I can have more panels and employ more gadgets connected to those panels, more batteries. So this way, I think you have much more freedom. So this is the idea that you are a separate unit. You are a generating station all by yourself. So if you go on, I have a list of advantages. Acha, poretta, please. Yeah, here I've listed all the advantages. See, you're directly harnessing the rooftop solar electricity which you're producing. You're not dependent on any electricity company. You have 24-hour availability because you're storing some of the electricity you're producing during the day, you can use. Rest of it you can store in batteries. Batteries are getting more and more efficient. Store in batteries and use that at night when there is no sun. You have the freedom. How many batteries should you buy? Depends on your need. Your need and my need may not be the same. There's absolutely no shock hazard because this electricity is direct current, DC electricity produced at 12 volts, 6 volts, 9 volts, and so on. And all of us know that 12-volt electricity doesn't produce a shock. You have as much control on carbon footprint reduction. It is absolutely carbon footprint free. You know how much carbon footprint you're reducing. The wonderful thing is, once you've paid for the initial installation, you're getting free electricity. There are no electric bills to worry about. Now, many of the things that we use at home, for instance, the most ubiquitous mobile phone, you have a charger which you plug into the wall. The wall produces 220 volts AC. Does your mobile phone work on 220 volts AC? No, sir, no, madam, it doesn't. What happens is that there is a charger, a little box. The 220 volt AC is converted to 5 volts DC, and that's what the mobile can use. So why not directly use sunlight to charge your mobile? I do it every day. So you see, you are avoiding this conversion cycle, and with it, the lowering of energy, the loss, you're avoiding it completely. Like I said, it's a do-it-yourself thing. You can do it yourself. A little bit of training, and then you can become independent of the electricity provider. This won't happen in a day. It probably will take a generation. But you see, the whole point is that we will have to move. You have to remember, Mother Earth, we have to continue to move towards something which can help Mother Earth. That's very, very important. So the other thing which I wanted to say is that this is so innocuous, the whole exercise. You can use it to integrate with the local economy. So the idea is that if the youth, local youth in any area, in any city or town or village are interested, they can be trained. The training is very simple. We have been actually giving the training. After the training, with some little bit of capital, some startup companies may be opened where solar panels and all the accessories, batteries, and all the other things are being sold. So as a result, you see, you have an incredible source of job creation, which has not been tapped to the fullest extent in this country. It is very decentralized, it's very local. So people can do themselves. It's a community thing. We can do it for our own community. It's very different from the standard way that we all depend on the state government or the central government to be the provider for jobs. It need not be like that at all. Acha, poretta bhai? Yeah. Okay, so I have probably taken up quite a bit of my time. I don't know when I began, so maybe Moidul or somebody can tell me how much more time is available to me.
You continue, sir. Shall you continue?
Okay, so should I continue for maybe 20 minutes?
10 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
10 minutes. 10 minutes is
Yes.
a little. Okay, let me try. All right. Okay, so now I shall tell you a little bit about our own effort. Our own effort consists of, basically Shekhar Banerjee. Shekhar Banerjee, he is the main person, he's the solar electronics expert. And he has produced many things at home. We do not have any grants. Whatever has been made by Shekhar and myself together, working together from our own resources. But we did manage, and of course, I would say that my wife, Manavi Majumdar, and my sister, Subhadra Urmila Majumdar, have been extremely helpful in this matter. They've been close allies in our solar venture. So here, what I show is a logo of our website. It's called Shurja Karma, and that's the URL of the website. The two things that I show in the panel below on the left-hand side are electrical, colored electrical lights which Shekhar has made. They are running on battery, which have been charged by solar panels. And on the right-hand side, we have a kind of half sun thing which Shekhar has made from LED lamps. So these are LED lamps which are running on solar energy indirectly through batteries. Okay, Parita. So this is a picture of the dining room in our house, where you can see it's a pretty large room, but the illumination here is completely by solar energy. And below we show two fans. The one on the left is not something that Shekhar made, but he bought it. This is a Chinese 12-volt solar energy fan, which works on a 12-volt battery if it's charged properly. And it's a beautiful fan. It works very nicely. Of course, during this monsoon season, you have to be careful about charging your battery. You have to give them adequate time. The wonderful thing on the right-hand side is called a bladeless electric fan. Now, this is something, I don't know if you can see the picture. You can see the little strips of ribbon, which are horizontal. They are horizontal. They were vertical to begin with. And when the battery was connected to this fan, there's a blow of the wind coming out towards you, and there is no blade inside. So this is another thing which Shekhar has made. It's Shekhar's version of what is called a Dyson fan. It works on solar energy, of course. Now we come to some other things which Shekhar has made, because we figured that apart from lighting and fan, there should be other prototypes which you could venture in. At that time, I was teaching in Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda University in Belur Math, and Shekhar was also coming to that university as a project leader, and we had to take the ferry across the Ganga. Now, this ferry is a 1979 ferry, which is basically it works on diesel, and it's producing so much smoke that you can hardly sit inside the ferry. It's always full of smoke. Very polluting. So we then decided that there must be a way out of this, and Shekhar immediately got down. The left-hand side is a balsa, is a boat made out of balsa wood. Now here you see the panel. It's a very thin panel. This is the panel which is made out of the CIGS material, copper indium gallium selenide. The right-hand side is also made by Shekhar, but that has another ecological property. It's made from, not from wood, but from bamboo and betel leaves, pan pata. So this is completely, not being made of wood has a virtue because, bamboo regenerates. Bamboo is a grass, it's not tree, it's a grass, so it regenerates much easier. Lower panel left is a tram. I wish I would live to the day when the Kolkata tramway will switch to the solar tram. On the right-hand side, what Shekhar did was to reverse engineer a toy. Suddenly, toys have become very useful, very popular, right? After that speech on Sunday. But anyway, this toy was made before the speech, and this is a Jeep which runs very fast, and you can see the same panel, the copper gallium CIGS panel that's been used here. So these are the prototypes. Question is, will someone take care to scale these up? Okay, next slide. Next, I took Parita. Yeah. So on the top panel, the left-hand side, we have something which came up because somebody in our family was having an operation. There was a saline dispenser which was being given to the person after an operation. And what happened was the saline dispenser ran out of saline. And so everybody got very concerned because there was this feeling that there could be air bubbles going in and blood would flow out and all sorts of horrible things would happen. And all that happened because the nurse on duty fell asleep. So Shekhar came up with a brilliant idea, again, to produce an extremely cheap object which would produce the alarm. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but next to the saline bottle is a little alarm machine here, which again works off solar energy. And so, in other words, it can be used in places where there is no electricity. You can simply use it by having some battery and so on. Works very cheaply and works very well. So what happens is when the saline decreases up to a certain, down to a certain level, the alarms turns on and there's a sound and a light effect that comes with the alarm. So if anybody is going asleep, unless that person is really deaf, he or she will be woken up. The right-hand side is another brilliant thing. It's called a nerve stimulator. Now, you can see probably the voltmeter showing a voltage of 24.3. Now, this voltage is not a steady voltage. It's like a little tingling sensation. 24.3 volts does not give you a shock, but it does produce a sensation. The whole purpose of this is to be able to use it for people who have pains. You know, people like my age, 60s plus and so on, they have pains in various parts of the body. And if you use these two units and pass this shock for a little while, then the pain reduces. So this is called a nerve stimulator. In big physiotherapy units, you find very expensive ideas. But again, Shekhar, being the brilliant man he was able to produce this extremely cheaply. Now is the time for the pandemic, and there's something we all hear about. It's called a pulse oximeter. So the other day, Shekhar visited me and I said, Shekhar, can we make a pulse oximeter which runs on solar energy so that even if there's a load shedding or something, you know if your oxygen saturation is going down. And here it is. Shekhar has made this pulse oximeter and you can see the solar panel connected to it. What you cannot see is the display here. So if you put your finger here, here the display just begins. And here I can see this, but this is probably too small for you to see. You can see that the pulse beat is 79 and the oxygen saturation is 98%. So this person, I think this could be Shekhar, is quite healthy with regard to oxygen saturation. But this is a simple device which he has made using ingenious craft. I mean, this is really beautiful. Okay. Aro, poreta. Now the mosquito menace. I think everybody knows about it. You know, malaria, dengue, chikungunya, encephalitis, and these two kinds of mosquitoes, Aedes aegypti and Anopheles. This one causes dengue. The right one, Anopheles, causes malaria. We all know about it. What do we do about it? What do we do about this kind of pandemic, which is, well, people are already saying that, you know, past this monsoon, we're going to see a resurgence of dengue or malaria, who knows? So let's go on. Porita. Yeah, so this is what we do, right? It's called Mosha Marte Kamandawa, literally. Well, this is a canon, but Arikto opore tulben. And you see, this is supposed to be safe because when you see the smoke coming out, all of you have seen this kind of fogging. You say, "What about ki ache?" And he says, "Dana kichu hobe na," but he's wearing his mask, so it can't be completely innocuous, right? Completely safe. It can't be completely safe. Acha, porta. It's the same thing, you know. The fogging is also done outdoors to control larvae. But then, why is the operator so heavily protected? Because this foam, this smoke that he's giving out, is actually bad for human beings. It's harmful. Okay, what? So here is a list of the problems. It's highly toxic, injurious to human beings. It's like smoking a lot of cigarettes. Even if you're a non-smoker, you're forced to smoke a lot of cigarettes. The water-soluble toxic chemicals that you're trying to kill larvae with, we don't know, okay, how much they affect it. Nobody has made a good estimate of how much they affect the water table. What do they do to the flora and fauna inside the water? I mean, with the mosquito, suppose you kill the mosquito, but are you not killing a host of other useful animals and plants with it. The risk estimates are not fully known. Okay, okay, Poretta. This is very familiar, the mosquito coil, whatever, this is all out or thing, and the heat spray. This is all something that we use in our house. Heat mar. Okay, and all of these are extremely harmful. They contain toxic chemicals. So don't think, I mean, there's a TV which shows this good night being turned on and the baby is completely safe. My God, the baby is being harmed every second because of the toxic chemical that this bat is producing when it's heated up. It's called altharin. So there are huge effects happening here. Nobody gets to see how much damage is being caused by these things. So these are all toxic chemicals being used to kill mosquitoes, and they have effects on human beings. We are not immune to the effects. So what do? Poretta bhai. Okay, so this is our method of larva control, the solar method. I think the order should really be from below. So okay, the first thing is to see what do larvae do. আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, যেরকম ভাবে আছে সেরকম থাক। The larva, mosquito larva, the water through a tube. They use this tube to breathe, okay? And if the surface is not very still, the larva can't breathe. So you see the larva on the right-hand side, they're using their tube to breathe because the surface is very still. So the idea that we had was to be able to disturb the surface of the water. You don't have to do anything below. Just disturb the surface of the water enough. And in places where there is no electricity, you can use solar energy. So we use that. Directly the solar panel is connected to the machine, and this is the machine. I have named this machine Shekhar's turbulator because it causes a turbulence on the solar surface. Because it causes turbulence, what happens is that the larva can no longer breathe. If you go to the next slide, you can actually see this. Well, you see this little black lines, little bit black things here, they are the larva. And because now the surface is being shaken up, there's a huge turbulence in the surface, the larva can't go and stick their tube up and breathe. So we found in our laboratory experiments in a college, in Hiralal Memorial Women's College, we found that if you expose these larvae, a certain quantity of larvae to a certain amount of time, then 90% of the larvae are dead by this process. And yet, this process does not involve any toxic chemicals. It's completely non-toxic, and it's running from solar energy, so it's completely ecologically friendly. Okay, so we have been able to give a proof of concept that this can be done. So this was our achievement in a sense, and we have written a paper which we are trying to publish. But there's more. You might say, larva morbe to porer byapar, now the mosquito is biting me, so I want to do something about biting. Here again, we came up with a nice idea, because it turns out that mosquitoes are sensitive to light. But they are not sensitive to the same colors equally. They have a differential in their sensitivity to light, to the wavelength of light. Okay, and you see that nowadays, if you look at all those beautiful LED lamps, you can see that there's less accumulation of shamapoka on those lamps compared to earlier times when you had neon lamps or halogen lamps and they were completely covered with shamapoka. And that is because all those CFC halogen neons, they have this property that they attract these insects. The LED, fortunately, the LED lamps do not have this positive phototacticity. It's called phototactic. It's not phototactic to that extent. But we went ahead because we found that if you go ahead and you use different kind of LEDs, there are glass LEDs, SMD LEDs, and RGB LEDs. These are different kind of light emitting diodes. And infrared LEDs, they have different effect on mosquitoes. And what our empirical observation is that you can construct, again, Shekhar did, constructed low-cost RGB LEDs and infrared lamps, which actually repel mosquitoes. Now at home, when we sit down to watch TV, usually my sister is the first to get bitten by mosquitoes. And what happens is, when we have these lights in place, especially red RGB LED and infrared lamps, we find that it's not that completely she doesn't get a bite, but yes, with appropriate placement, she gets less bitten than anyone else. And we find that if you can put those lamps a little bit before anyone comes through the place, then it's much, much better. So mosquitoes tend to avoid the space if the LEDs are there, but unlike the people who sell you mats and mosquito coils, we would like to go through controlled experiments. We are trying to contact a professor of biology in Calcutta University who works with mosquitoes. Had it not been for the pandemic, we would have done the experiments by now in his laboratory, because we do not have a lab by ourselves. None of us is actually a biology person. Shekhar is, as I said, an electronics expert, and I do gravity. I work on black holes, so it's very different. Anyway, we are collaborating on this work, and eventually, I suppose we will be able to do that experiment. Acha, poretta. So I'm almost done. I think now we are going to the last one. So this is the last transparency. Thank you very much for your patience. I would like to simply summarize what our aims at Shudra Karma are. I have told you many of the things. I've shown you some of the things, and some of these things are still in the process of development. And okay, so this is the last one. Basically, LED lighting, I think we have under control. Fan systems, well, we are still experimenting with them. There is some way to go. There are certain other fans whose pictures I couldn't show you, but maybe some other time when my computer gets okay, I'll show you. I'll have another talk or something. Transport prototypes, we need urgently big organizations who would come to scale up, because without scaling up these transport prototypes, we don't even know that they work. However, about the boats, this is what Shekhar has been telling me for a long time, and I wish I had a picture of that. Unfortunately, I forgot about it. Basically, Kerala, near Kochi, there is this organization there's a boat called Aditya. I forget the name of the person. This boat runs on solar electricity. It's a ferry boat. It's a full-size ferry boat, and it has already been able to break even. So the cost of making this boat has been recovered from the profits that it's been able to make by transporting people across in Kochi. So pest repellents, this cooker, now we are experimenting with cookers. The other day, on my insistence, we tried to cook something up on the roof, and it was a disaster because suddenly a cloud came and rain and so on, so the thing didn't cook properly. But I think, this is already the middle of Bhadra, so when Ashwin comes, perhaps autumn will allow us to do solar cooking much more efficiently. But there are ideas to improve, to reduce the time for solar cooking, to improve the way it cooks. Shekhar has another thing up his sleeve, which is really fantastic. Now, all of us have this AquaGuard, right? Now, this AquaGuard is confined to mostly cities and big towns. What about villages? There is an acute problem of pure water. This is a problem all over the country. And Shekhar has been able to make an ultraviolet water purifier using solar energy. Now, I think this is fantastic work, and I think this requires to be sponsored and manufactured. Shekhar and I are both getting on, so younger people should step in and start manufacturing these things. On another footing, there's this public dissemination among students and youth. We need to disseminate awareness and knowledge about solar energy. There are a lot of things which people think about solar energy, which are incorrect, like it's very expensive, it's not feasible, it's not viable, and so on and so forth. All that is incorrect. Okay. As I said, we have been thinking about, we have actually gone to a college, Prabhat Kumar College in Kathi, to give training to one of the classes about solar energy. And they are very excited. And we, in fact, in the ladies' hostel, we were able to set up some solar lighting, LED lighting, because the principal said that the electricity bill was going up too high. But we used it in our own way, decentralized. Okay? So I would like to finish by just asking, we have great economic disparity in this country. I'm completely perturbed about that. It's extremely sad that we have poor, very poor people, and we also have extremely rich people. I don't think this is right. I don't think this is fair at all. Eminent economists all over the world are saying that this is a very unstable situation, which will lead to a catastrophe. We need to level the economic disparity. What can be better than solar energy? I thank you most ardently for being so patient. I can see that there's still quite a few participants who have remained, and I shall be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello. Now,
Yes.
now introduction session is going on.
Now interaction session is going on. You feel free to ask questions.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm Nupur Dasgupta from Jadavpur University.
Yes, Dr. Dasgupta.
Yeah, I would like to thank the speaker for delivering such an illuminating and interesting lecture. It was extremely informative and very useful. I just would like to know exactly what percentage of the world consumption of energy is being supplied right now by solar energy.
In India, I mean, this is something that I'm not an expert on, but what I know now is that 90% of the electricity used in India comes from thermal power stations. Now,
Right.
of the remaining 10%, I think solar is now increasing because it's still less than 10%, but I would say it's about 6% now, which is great because if you compare it with nuclear energy, which has been around for a much longer time, nuclear energy is still less than 3%. Supplies electricity less than 3% of the total consumption. So we are already ahead of nuclear energy. In fact, there was a very nice seminar on usage of coal on this connection. You see, like I said, why do we need coal power plants? Because it's already happening. You see that people are realizing that more and more extensive use of solar energy is going to make thermal power stations less and less useful. Like I said, we don't care about our electricity bill so much. We don't care about our electricity bill so much, but we do see that we are able to rely on solar energy even in our house in Kolkata. Okay, so I think this percentage is going to grow by leaps and bounds. But all of us have to join in. So it's an effort which requires a collective mobilization.
I would just like to add to my query is that given the variability in climatic condition in India, and as you said that you had that problem while cooking because it was raining or it became cloudy all of a sudden. So how do you manage this variability in the climatic condition, and how do you really stream solar energy on a very regular basis throughout our country, given the country has a variable climate?
Yeah, okay. So the point is that I'm not, the way that we are talking about solar energy, everybody manufactures her or his own solar energy. So nobody has to supply solar energy to anyone, unlike electricity from thermal power stations and so on. Now, let's suppose you want to do solar energy. It is true that during the monsoon season, 2 or 3 months, there is a lot of variability because there are clouds and sunshine is not continuous. However, cooking apart, if it's only charging batteries, I think the only difference is that you have to charge them for a bit longer than when there is direct sunshine. It has been happening. We've been doing it, okay? And the entire lighting in our ground floor, which has, the portico, the living room, and my sister's bedroom, the solar lamp works for 3 to 4 hours at night, from 6 to 10 o'clock, maybe sometimes even longer. In our dining hall upstairs, the solar lighting works for 5, 6 hours. But of course, you have to very carefully adjust the times so that the same solar panels can be used optimally. So, because you see, the photovoltaic means whenever you have light, so unless the sky is overcast by very dark clouds, you always have light. And because you always have light, you'll always produce electricity. Sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less. There is variability, but the variability can be within tolerable limits. And again, you can work around this variability by having few more panels, few more batteries. So you produce a little bit more. But as I said, this is all very cheap now. Somehow solar energy, the way we are talking about, is not an expensive venture. So please try it out. Other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Any question? Next question?
There are some questions in the chat box. May I read it?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay. First question: how much is solar energy currently helping the financial lives of the poor and helpless people in India?
Now, this is, of course, a very complicated question if you think about all of India. But I know of some slum areas in our locality. Abando, can you turn off your microphone, please? Abando, can you turn off your microphone? Huh? So, like I was saying, that in our locality, there is a slum. Every locality has a slum. Now, in our locality, the slum has some electrical connections, but they're very sporadic. Sometimes they have electricity, sometimes not. They used to do this hooking, and they used to get caught, and there used to be a lot of golmaal happening all the time. Now, they have switched now to solar energy. And you'll find that these slum dwellings now have access to solar energy. So I see a change happening in front of my eyes. Now, these slums used to be very dark, they're now lit. LED lights are everywhere. So there's already a change that I've noticed. Now, if I multiply this by taking it all over India, you get a very encouraging picture, right? Yeah.
Yes. Next question from Somnath Mondol. My question is how can we install a domestic DC Tulu pump by using solar panel? What would be the cost?
Again, I don't know the cost so well. A Tulu pump can be run. They're in fact already available DC pumps. So this is not something which is beyond effort. It is already within accessibility. There are water pumps which can be used to lift water to maybe the first floor or the second floor. But I don't know how, I don't know exactly, the full range of capacities of these pumps. But you see, the way you think about it is that if you want a higher capacity pump, you just need a larger capacity solar panel and a larger capacity battery. And then you do the trick. That works, okay? So there are pumps available, DC pumps, which work on solar energy, okay? So in the villages, I've seen situations where they are using solar panels to run pumps in the fields. So this is again something which is already being used. Now, of course, there's a question of optimization, but that may happen later on. Okay?
Okay, next question. Can we can we get access to solar device for our homes? Where should we contact?
Oh, the best place is just Chandni market. The Chandni market is absolutely fantastic for all the kinds. I mean, I can say that everything that you saw in my talk, all the things that Shekhar made, everything was purchased from Chandni market. Chandni market is a very user-friendly place. You can go and buy things there, okay? And they're quite cheap, so it's not expensive at all. So these are things which you can buy. And if you need help, we shall help you. Shekhar and myself are always at your service. Yes, what is the next question?
Okay, next question. A light you can read by with the panel and the battery and LED is around 2000 more or less. Is it a question?
Oh, okay. So you were asking how much the panel costs. Panel light battery. Yeah. Now, okay. So let me give you a disaggregated, broken up figure. A panel, of course, depends on how big the panel is. Suppose you want a panel which produces 10 watts of electricity, then that's about 1,000, less than 1,000 rupees. Okay. If you want a slightly bigger panel, a 50-watt solar panel, that costs about 2,300 rupees. A battery, if you want the cheapest battery, that's this battery which is there in this uninterrupted power supply, 12-volt battery. This UPS battery. The UPS battery costs around 600, 700 rupees. LED lights, they are now become extremely cheap. Okay, I should mention one thing though. Most of these things are of Chinese manufacturing. Now, if it turns out that Chinese goods are going to be banned from India, then the costs are going to become enormous. But at the current moment, Chinese goods being available, you find that, yeah, so the panel is about, let's say, 2,500, battery is about 600, so 3,100, and maybe 200-300 more for the LED. So, that's about the price. So about 4,000 is a good package. And the kind of lights that we have now are very bright lights, which Shekhar has got from Chandni. Again, these are very eminently available. So they're not exotic things. You just go and buy them from Chandni. Okay, the next one.
Okay, Parthada.
Yes, please.
I want to know about the super capacitor instead of battery. What is it actually?
Oh, Shobhan. Well, supercapacitor is a capacitor which is very different from an electrolytic capacitor. It will take a little bit longer and slightly more technical, so maybe I can tell you privately. Supercapacitors are great. We have employed supercapacitors in some of the things which you saw. But then again, batteries are still much cheaper because we don't manufacture. India does not manufacture supercapacitors. So the supercapacitors that we use have to be purchased from abroad, and there's always a price to pay for that. So price-wise, you're still better off with battery in India for everyday use. Okay, but I can tell you about the supercapacitor. I'll send you the details to you later on. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. The next question, please?
Okay, there is no question in the chat box, so it's up to the chair.
Sir, will you say something? Chair?
Professor Palit, আপনি কি কিছু বলবেন?
Sir, can you say something?
Oh, please, yeah. Please say. Please speak up.
স্যার আপনার আনমিউট আছে, একটু আনমিউট করুন। মিউট আছে আপনার চিত্রপট কালী স্যার, আপনার আনমিউট করুন।
স্যার আপনি আনমিউট করুন, মিউট করা আছে। পালিত স্যার, পালিত স্যার, পালিত স্যার, Honorable Director, please unmute your microphone. Sir? Sir, mute করা আছে, unmute করুন। Sir? পালিত স্যার? স্যার? Any question? Audience? Any more question?
No.
No question?
No.
আরে অবর্ণ নামগুলো পড়ে দাও, অ্যারেঞ্জ করছে কি এসেছো? আরে কোশ্চেন গুলো যে চ্যাট বক্সে কোশ্চেন হচ্ছে সেগুলো প্রপারলি করো নাম বলে। এখানে লবি হচ্ছে কেন?
ইনবক্সে যে কোশ্চেন গুলো আছে
তাদের কে কে কোশ্চেন করেছেন তাদের নামগুলো পড়ছে না কেন? মইদুলের ভাই কি করছো?
হ্যাঁ মোহিত এক মিনিট। হ্যাঁ, so I request the base operator to please tell the name of the persons who have asked the questions and which was answered by the speaker right now, just now. So one of the audiences.
Yes, I understand it, but there are some technical problem occurred, so that's why I left and again joined. Therefore, I can see the chat box, all the question. So it is very sorry that I can't.
টেকনিক্যাল প্রবলেম এটা হয় না কখনো। তুমি ইন্টেনশনালি এটা করেছো, এগুলো করবে না, একদম ফাদ্দার করবে না। ইসি মেম্বার হিসেবে আমি বলছি। আর আজকে আলোচককে আমার শ্রদ্ধা জানাই, বিনয় জানাই, এবং আজকে সুন্দর বলেছেন আপনি। আগামী দিনে আমরা ইনস্টিটিউট অফ হিস্ট্রিক্যাল স্টাডিজ থেকে আপনাকে পেতে চাই আরো বেশি ভাবে। আর আমাদের ডিরেক্টর আজকে নিশ্চয় বলবেন, ওনাকে কানেকশনটা দাও, আর শুভেচ্ছা জানাবেন। এগুলো ডিপি ওয়েবনারে ডিপি।
মইদুল ইসলামকে বলবো যে চ্যাট বক্সে একটু স্ক্রল করুন, আপনি সমস্ত কোশ্চেন দেখতে পাবেন, ওখান থেকে একটু কোশ্চেন গুলো বলে দিন কাইন্ডলি।
বলে দিয়েছে সব কোশ্চেন।
Yes, Mohitul Gayan is asking how much is solar energy currently helping the financial lives of poor and helpless people in India? This is the question for Dr. Mohitus Gayan. EC member Mohitus Gayan.
This question I've already answered it.
Yes, sir.
I've already answered this question.
Hello. Actually, Dr. Mohitus Gayan asked me a question: how much is solar energy currently helping the financial life of poor and helpless people in India? This question by Dr. Mohitus Gayan.
এটা উনি বলেছেন, তো উত্তর দিয়েছেন।
Okay.
উত্তর দিয়ে দিয়েছেন অলরেডি।
Okay, you do one thing actually. You have already asked a question, but the screen is not showing. So I'm extremely sorry. I can't repeat. Now, if you any question, you can tell directly.
Yes. So the.
Thank you. Don't worry. Thank you.
Okay, there is a question from Souvik Biswas. Can we drive train by using solar energy?
Actually, Shobik, you did see that there was a tram prototype which was driven by solar energy. So in principle, of course you can, but I could go further and point out that in China, once again, China is supposed to be not our friend anymore, but in China, they already have constructed trams which use solar energy. So once again, there are things happening. In France, in Belgium, no, in France, in Bordeaux, they have a tram which runs partly on solar energy. So it's a hybrid tram. It runs partly on solar energy and partly on grid electricity. So once again, these are all available, and there is more research going on so that we can look a complete changeover to solar energy. So it's certainly possible. Any other questions, please?
Western minority used to sell solar panel. Is it available still now?
Oh, Ms. Korobi Mitro, she has a question about WBREDA. I don't know about WBREDA. I know that once upon a time, you're absolutely right, they used to sell solar panels, but solar panels are now available much easier and much cheaper in Chandni market. There are many shops. And if you contact us, we can come with you, and we know some shops which give you a bargain. So maybe we can go and get these together.
Thank you.
Any other questions, please?
Wonderful.
Okay, Moidul, I think there is no other question. So do you want to wind it up? Moidul?
না, আর কোনো প্রশ্ন নেই।
আর কোনো
চিত্তবত
প্রশ্ন নেই?
পালিত বৈদুর, চিত্তবত পালিত স্যারকে দাও, উনি বলবেন স্যার।
না, উনি তো বলছেন, কিন্তু ওনার মাইক্রোফোনটা আনমিউট করতে হবে। ওনাকে একটু ফোন করে বললে ভালো হয়।
Hello.
হ্যাঁ, বলো।
Actually, sir is not connecting. Actually, sir is not find the how to unmute. So it's very difficult to touch with Professor Palit. So if on behalf of Institute of History Studies, our employee PRO, Dr. Abhorna Chatterjee, will give vote of thanks.
So I think that no more questions, and our director cannot be joined, some technical problems. So with the permission of the director, I am proposing the vote of thanks. On behalf of the Institute of Historical Studies, at the outset, I want to thank the family of Professor N. Subrahamanian or Professor N. Subrahamanian for having instituted this wonderful lecture. We have lectures on various aspects of history, but Professor Subrahamanian wanted that this lecture should not only cover history, but also the emerging aspects that are cropping up nowadays. So I want to thank Professor N. Subrahamanian and his family for instituting this lecture. I would want to thank from my heart the Honorable Director of the Institute of Historical Studies, Professor Chittabrata Palit, who has shared this lecture in a very wonderful way. Professor Palit, or our director sir, is a very enlightened and a very wise person, and he has helped us in all ways to organize the first webinar of the Institute of Historical Studies. Next, I want to thank the speaker, Professor Parthasarathi Majumdar, who has lit up with his valuable, I shall not only say speech, but demonstration, lecture demonstration, this first the webinar of this Institute of Historical Studies, as also he has lit up this webinar, and he has very wonderfully delivered the Professor N. Subrahamanian Endowment lecture. Thank you, sir, for giving this lecture in such a wonderful way. And the topic you selected is a very current topic nowadays. Solar energy. Many researchers are doing research on solar energy, and your lecture has opened up a new dimension regarding the research on solar energy. I remember a few years back in Kolkata, our Raj Bhavan was illuminated with solar light in 2010. The then President of India, Mrs. Pratibha Deva Singh Patil, inaugurated the solar project in Raj Bhavan along with the then Governor of West Bengal, Sri Gopal Krishna Gandhi. Sir, your lecture has opened new dimensions regarding various aspects of solar energy, and I think that the researchers, the scholars, and the students and the participants who are in this webinar are all very will all be very benefited by the various dimensions of your lecture. You talked about the Rig Veda, and Rig Veda also talked about solar energy, and your lecture has opened up, has shown many unknown facts regarding this diverse subject. Uh, I would also like to want to thank my colleagues who have helped me in organizing this endowment lecture, this webinar. We all work as a team. I shall not take anyone's name personally, but I would, but I would also, but I would like to thank all of my colleagues who have helped me in organizing this webinar. Last but not the least, I shall be failing in my duty if I don't thank from the core of my heart Sheikh Maidul Rahman. Please give a big hand for him. Sheikh Maidul Rahman, Sheikh Safiq Rahman, Hassan Dhabok, the main technician, the best lecture person, Dr. Abu Shaleh, Dr. Mutin, and and others associated with the technical team. Last but not the least, I was amazed to see that nearly 96 participants have attended the first webinar organized by the Institute of Historical Studies. I thank all of you who attended the lecture, this webinar, the students, the scholars, the researchers, and friends and ladies and gentlemen. Your presence has really lit up this webinar, and the discourses, the question and session was very lively. Thank you all. With these words, I end my vote of thanks here. Thank you all. So, with the permission of the chair,